Imagine losing the only person you ever truly loved. Not to death. Not to another man. But to silence. To 4 years of empty rooms, cold sheets, and a name you whispered into the dark every single night, praying, just once, she would whisper back. Now imagine this. You are the most feared man in Seoul. Men tremble when they hear your name. Entire criminal empires bend the knee when you walk into a room. You have more money than some governments. You have power that could shake mountains. But for 4 years, you couldn't find her. Your wife. Your heart. The woman who vanished without a single word the morning after the worst night of your lives. And then, on a Tuesday, in a tiny diner in Atlanta, Georgia, your best man slides a photograph across the table. She's wearing a yellow waitress apron. Her natural hair is pulled back with a pencil. She's laughing at something a customer said. And her belly is round and full and unmistakably pregnant. Your hands are shaking. You, a man who has never shaken in his life, are trembling like a boy. Because that is your wife. And that, may be your child. Ladies, if your heart just dropped to the floor, you are exactly where I need you to be. Before we begin, my mum said this video cannot reach 10,000 views and 1,000 subscribers. Let's prove her wrong. Smash that like button, subscribe right now, and drop in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's get into this story. The photograph landed on the mahogany desk at exactly 11:47 p.m. Minute Jun Kwon didn't look up immediately. He was in the middle of signing a document that would quietly dissolve a rival's shipping empire, the kind of paperwork that never saw a courtroom but always got results. His fountain pen moved across the page with calm, lethal precision. Boss. Park Sung-woo, his second in command and the closest thing he had to a brother, cleared his throat. You need to see this. I'm busy. Minute Jun. Sung-woo never used his first name. Never. Not in 12 years. The pen stopped. Minute Jun looked up. And the expression on Sung-woo's face, that careful, cautious look of a man delivering news he didn't fully understand himself, made something old and buried twist behind Minute Jun's ribs. He looked down at the photograph. The world went silent. Not the comfortable silence of a man in control. The devastating silence of a man who has just had the ground yanked from beneath his feet after 4 years of learning, painstakingly, how to stand. Amma. She was laughing. Of course she was laughing. Even here, even in a diner uniform with flour on her sleeve and her magnificent hair barely contained by a yellow pencil, she was the most radiant thing he had ever seen in his life. She had always been able to do that, fill a room with light she didn't even know she was producing. He had missed that laugh so much it had become a physical sensation. Like a bruise that never healed. Like pressing your tongue to a sore tooth just to feel something. And then his eyes traveled lower. His jaw tightened. How far along? His voice was completely flat. The voice his enemies feared most. Not the raised voice, not the shout, but that quiet, measured tone that meant every single emotion had been locked down and weaponized. Our contact estimate 7 to 8 months. Sung-woo said carefully. 7 months. Minute Jun did the arithmetic with the cold efficiency of a man who had made a career out of calculation. 4 years, 3 months, and 11 days since Amma Asante disappeared from their penthouse in Seoul. 7 months pregnant. Which meant, where is she? He asked. Atlanta. A place called Sunnyside Diner on Peachtree Road. She's been there 8 months. Goes by the name Amy Sanders. Pays cash for everything. No phone registered in her name. No social media. Sung-woo paused. She's very good at hiding, boss. We only found her because she used her real laugh. Minute Jun looked up sharply. What? Sung-woo almost smiled. One of our Atlanta contacts was eating there. He said a customer knocked an entire tray of food over a woman, and this waitress, Amy, laughed so hard she had to hold the counter. He said it was the most distinct sound he'd ever heard. Like bells and thunder at the same time. He filmed it. Sent it to me as a joke. He shook his head quietly. I recognized her in 4 seconds. Her laugh. Even hiding under a false name, in a foreign country, in a yellow apron, Amma Asante couldn't hide that laugh. Minute Jun picked up the photograph with fingers that were, to his absolute humiliation, not entirely steady. He looked at her face. Really looked. Past the laughter, past the glow that pregnancy had draped over her like gold silk, and he saw something that cracked him straight down the center. She looked tired. Not the tired of a long shift. The tired of a woman who had been carrying something heavy entirely alone for a very long time. What happened to you? He thought. What did I do that made you run so far? Because he knew, even across 4 years and an ocean, that whatever had sent Amma Asante running was something he had done. Or failed to do. She had not been stolen. She had not been threatened. The woman had packed a single bag, left her wedding ring on the bathroom counter beside a note that contained exactly 4 words, and walked out of his life. 4 words he had memoized like a prayer. I cannot stay, Minute. Not Minute Jun. Just Minute. The name she had called him when they were alone. The name that meant she was talking to him, not to the boss, not to the feared head of the Kwan organization, but to the man she had married on a rainy Saturday in Accra with her grandmother crying in the front row. He set the photograph down. He straightened his cuffs. Clear my schedule, he said quietly. All of it. Sung-woo blinked. Everything? Boss, the Tokyo negotiations alone. Everything. He stood. At 6'2", Minute Jun Kwon was an imposing figure, broad-shouldered, dark-eyed, the kind of man who commanded attention without trying. But tonight, something different lived in his expression. Something raw and hungry and terrified that he would have died before letting any other soul see. Book a private flight to Atlanta. Tonight. Sung-woo hesitated. And when you find her. Minute Jun picked up the photograph one last time. He looked at his wife's laughing face. He looked at the roundness of her belly. He thought of 4 years of silence and cold sheets and a wedding ring sitting in a velvet box in his top drawer because he couldn't bring himself to move it. When I find her, he said softly, I'm bringing her home. He slipped the photograph into his breast pocket. Against his chest. Where she had always belonged. And this time, he added, his voice dropping to something barely audible, something that sounded less like a threat and more like a vow, I am not letting her go. 4 years, 3 months, and 12 days earlier, Amma Asante had stood in an airport bathroom in Seoul, splashed cold water on her face, and made the most terrifying decision of her life. She had looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. She was 26 years old. She had a first-class degree in hospitality management from the University of Ghana. She could speak 4 languages, make jollof rice that made grown men weep, and deliver a verbal takedown with the precision of a surgeon. She had survived her mother's death at 15, raised her 2 younger brothers on her own through university, and built a career from absolutely nothing. She was not a woman who ran. And yet, she had zipped her single bag, tucked her passport, her real passport, not the supplementary 1 Minute Jun's people had arranged, into her coat pocket. And she had walked away from the most beautiful, terrifying, complicated love she had ever known. She had walked away because she had overheard something the night before that she was never, ever supposed to hear. And because she was, at that moment, 6 weeks pregnant, and the last thing in the world she was willing to do was bring a child into the life she had just discovered she was actually living. She hadn't planned to stay in Atlanta. Atlanta had been a layover. A connection to London, where she had a university friend and a vague plan to start over. But on the connecting gate, sitting with her carry-on between her feet and her hand pressed flat against her still flat stomach, she had started crying. Not quietly. The full ugly cry, shoulders heaving, breath coming in gasps, the kind of crying that makes strangers uncomfortable and babies sympathetic. A woman had sat down next to her. A big, warm, southern woman in a church hat and sensible shoes who had pressed a pack of tissues into her hand and said, Baby, wherever you're running to, you don't look like you have the strength to get there today. Her name was Miss Claudette. She owned a diner. She needed a front-of-house manager. She had a spare room above the diner she rented cheap. Amma had taken it as a sign. She had missed her London connection. She had followed Miss Claudette to a 1987 BIC in the Shortstay car park. And she had become Amy Sanders, a name she'd pulled from thin air because she'd been reading a book with a character named Amy on the plane, within 48 hours. That had been 4 years ago. She had her regulars now. Old Mr. Patterson who called her Sunshine, and always ordered the same thing. The Tuesday morning book club ladies who overtipped and asked inappropriate questions about her love life. The college students who treated the diner like their living room. She had made something real here. Something hers. And she was good at her job. Terrifyingly good. Miss Claudette had handed her the management of the entire diner within 3 months and gone back to what she actually wanted to do, which was watch her stories and spoil her grandchildren. Amma ran Sunnyside Diner with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had once managed the social calendar of a man who commanded a criminal empire. Nobody knew that, of course. To her regulars, she was Amy, funny, warm, slightly sharp-tongued Amy who made the best Kaluele spiced sweet potato fries anyone had ever tasted and who once reduced a rude customer to a stammering apology using only her left eyebrow. She was content. She was not happy, she had long since stopped confusing the two, but she was content. She had her daughter to think about now. 6 weeks to go. A small apartment 3 blocks away. A crib she'd assembled herself with only 2 YouTube tutorials and 1 truly spectacular meltdown. She was going to be fine. She was telling herself this on a Thursday morning, waddling behind the counter with her lower back staging a quiet protest, when the bell above the diner door chimed. She didn't look up. She was restacking coffee cups and internally composing a strongly worded letter to the universe about the design flaws of the human spine during the 3rd trimester. "Take a seat anywhere," she called. "Menus on the table. I'll be right with you." Silence. Odd. Most customers said something. Even just a grunt. She looked up. And every single coffee cup she was holding hit the floor simultaneously. Because standing in the doorway of Sunnyside Diner, in a charcoal suit that had not come off any rack, with his dark eyes fixed on her face like she was the only thing in the room, in the world, in the entire known universe, was Minute Jun Kwon. Her husband. The man she had run from. The man she had spent 4 years trying, and spectacularly failing, to stop loving. He looked exactly the same. Older, maybe. Sharper around the jaw. New shadows under his eyes that her heart immediately recognized as the same shadows she saw in her own mirror. He looked at her belly. Something crossed his face that she had no word for. Something that lived between wonder and devastation and fury and, God help her, love. Pure, undisguised, completely unguarded love. She had forgotten that he could look at her like that. She had tried very hard to forget. "Amma," he said. Just her name. Just that. In that low, quiet voice she had heard in her dreams for 4 years. She lifted her chin. She squared her shoulders. She was a woman who had survived harder things than this. "We're out of the blueberry pancakes," she said. "Kitchen's backed up. Can I interest you in the French toast?" His mouth, that beautiful, infuriating mouth, dropped open slightly. And for the first time in 4 years, Minute Jun Kwon had absolutely no idea what to say. He hadn't expected her to be funny. He didn't know why. He knew her. He knew every layer of her, the fierce intelligence, the warmth that she handed out like it cost her nothing even when it cost her everything, the humor she used like a shield when she was terrified. He knew all of this. And yet standing in this small, sunny diner with the smell of coffee and cinnamon in the air, watching the mother of his, almost certainly his, child offer him French toast with a completely straight face while her hands shook almost imperceptibly against the counter. He was not prepared. He was never prepared for Amma. In 4 years of marriage, he had never once successfully prepared for Amma Asante. "French toast," he repeated. "It's very good," she said. "Miss Claudette's recipe. She does something with the vanilla that I've been trying to reverse engineer for 2 years." She was talking too fast. He could hear it. She could hear it too, if the slight tightening of her jaw was anything to go by. "You should sit down. You look," she paused, her eyes traveling over him, expensive and lost, which is a very specific combination. "Amma." "Amy." Her voice sharpened. Just slightly. A warning wrapped in a correction. "You are not Amy." "I absolutely am, and I have a Georgia driver's license that agrees with me." She bent, carefully, with the deliberate care of a woman in her final weeks of pregnancy, and began picking up the fallen coffee cups. He was across the counter in 3 seconds, crouching beside her, his hands covering hers. She froze. They were 6 inches apart. He could see the tiny scar above her eyebrow from the time she'd walked into a glass door at his penthouse and laughed so hard at herself she'd cried. He could see the small gold stud in her left nostril. She'd had it pierced on their honeymoon in Jeju Island and he'd kissed that exact spot 100,000 times. He could feel her breathing change. "I've got it," she said, very quietly. "I know." He didn't move. "I've got you." The words landed between them like a stone in still water. She was the one who pulled back. She straightened, one hand braced on the counter, the other automatically going to the side of her belly in the unconscious gesture of a woman deep in pregnancy. He stood too, and watched her face reassemble itself, watched the emotion get packed away behind those brilliant dark eyes with the practice of someone who had been doing it for a very long time. "You need to sit down," she said again. "Because I am absolutely not having this conversation while I'm holding coffee cups, and I'm also absolutely not having it standing up because my back is staging a labor action and I refuse to give it the satisfaction." She pointed at a corner booth. "The one furthest from the other customers. Over there. I'll bring you coffee." "I don't need." "Minute-jun." She said his name fully, deliberately, and it went through him like electricity. "I have been on my feet since 5 this morning. I am currently the size of a small peninsula. I have 1.5 months to go and my ankles have opinions about that. I will come talk to you when I have finished my side work, and I will do it sitting down, and I will have coffee, and you will wait. Are we clear?" He stared at her. She stared back. God, he had missed her. He went and sat in the corner booth. She brought him coffee 14 minutes later. He counted, along with, to his complete bewilderment, a plate of French toast. She slid in across from him with a cup of herbal tea and a small exhale of relief that she immediately tried to disguise. "You're tired," he said. "I'm pregnant, Minute-jun, not tired. Those are different things." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "How did you find me?" "Your laugh." Something flickered across her face. "Of course," she murmured. "A contact heard you. Filmed it." He paused. "Amma, 4 years. I know how long it's been." "Why?" The word came out more raw than he intended. More exposed. He watched something shift in her face, a hairline fracture in that composure. "I need to know why. I have asked myself every single day." "The Jong warehouse," she said simply. The world tilted. He went completely still. Because the Jong warehouse was the thing he had spent 4 years praying she didn't know about. The night everything had gone wrong. The night he had made a choice that had seemed, in the moment, like the only choice, and had spent every day since understanding with perfect clarity why it was the wrong one. "You heard," he said. "I heard everything." Her voice was steady, but her hands had tightened around the mug. "I heard what you ordered. I heard why. I heard what you were willing to do." She looked at him, and the grief in her eyes was old and worn and tired in the way only truly carried grief gets. "I couldn't stay. Amma. And then I found out I was pregnant." She said it simply, matter-of-factly, like it hadn't rearranged his entire universe in real time. "And I made a decision." He looked at her belly, at the life moving underneath that yellow apron. His throat was doing something complicated. "Is she?" He stopped. Recalibrated. "Is the baby yours?" She held his gaze steadily. "Yes. Obviously yes." A ghost of her old humor surfaced. "I've been a little busy to have a whole other relationship, Minute-jun. I've also been enormous for months. Nobody is flirting with me." He laughed. Actually laughed, the first real laugh in 4 years, and watched her eyes widen slightly at the sound, as if she'd forgotten what it sounded like too. "A girl?" he asked quietly. Her expression softened despite itself. "A girl." The word undid something in him. Something he'd been holding rigid for 4 years, like a man gripping a rope over a very long drop. He felt it give way, not collapse, but release. Like a fist finally opening. "I want to explain," he said. "The warehouse. What you heard, what actually happened, I need you to know the full truth." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked out the window at Peachtree Road, where the Atlanta morning was going about its ordinary, beautiful business, entirely unaware that the most important conversation of 2 people's lives was happening over French toast and herbal tea. "I'll listen," she said finally. But Minute-jun, she met his eyes, and her gaze was full of love and fury and 4 years of lonely nights. "It had better be a very good explanation." "It is," he said. "I promise you, it is." She nodded once. Picked up her mug. "Then talk," she said. "You've got until the lunch rush." Minute-jun took a breath. He had rehearsed this. He had rehearsed it 10,000 times in 4 years, in empty rooms, in moving cars, standing at the window of his penthouse watching Seoul go dark and then bright again. He had rehearsed it for the day he found her. He had been absolutely certain that when this moment came, he would be composed, measured, articulate. He was none of those things. The night you overheard me, he began, I was giving an order to have Lee Beamsu transferred to the Jong facility. Amma's hands stilled around her mug. Lee Beamsu. The name she had heard through the crack in his study door. The name that had sent her to the airport. I know what it sounded like, Minute-jun continued. I know what the word transfer means in our world. I know what happens at Jong. He paused. Lee Beamsu was not being sent there to be killed, Amma. She looked at him carefully. She had always been able to read him, it had terrified him in the beginning, being married to someone who could look straight through every wall he'd ever built. Then what? He was being extracted. Minute-jun set his coffee down. Lee Beamsu was a government informant. He had been inside the Park organization for 3 years, feeding intelligence to the National Intelligence Service. When his cover was blown, when Park's men found out, they were going to kill him. That night, he had hours. His jaw worked. The Jong facility is the most defensible location I control. I sent 12 men with him. He lived there for 8 months until the NIS could arrange his relocation. Silence. Amma stared at him. You were protecting him, she said slowly. Yes. Then why did you make it sound like? Because Sung-woo was in that room. His voice was quiet. And 2 other men whose loyalty I was not yet certain of. If I had said we are protecting an NIS informant, those men would have been dead before morning and so would Lee Beamsu. He looked at her directly. I used language that would make them think it was a punishment. A disposal. Because that was the only way to keep everyone alive. Amma was very still. He could see her processing it, that extraordinary mind of hers, the one that had always been 3 steps ahead of every room she walked into. You couldn't tell me, she said. Not a question. I didn't know you'd heard. The rawness was back in his voice, unguarded. If I had known, Amma, I would have told you everything. Every word. There is nothing in my life I have kept from you except what would put you in danger to know. She looked out the window again. He watched the line of her throat as she swallowed. I left because I thought you had ordered a man killed, she said quietly. I thought I had married someone I didn't know. I thought, her voice caught, just slightly. I thought if I stayed, I'd be raising my child inside something I couldn't protect her from. I know. I was wrong. You were protecting her. He said it firmly. Even if you were wrong about the reason, you were trying to protect our daughter. I cannot be angry at you for that. She turned back to him. Her eyes were bright, not with tears exactly, but with the pressure of 4 years of grief looking for somewhere to go. You could have found me sooner, she said. I tried. Something raw and helpless moved across his face. Amma, I turned the world upside down. I spent more money than some nations' GDP. I had people looking on 6 continents. You were, he exhaled, very thorough. I was scared, she said simply. I know. And I'm still. She pressed her hand to her belly, and he watched the gesture with everything he had. I'm still scared, Minute-jun. Not of you. I know that now. But of going back. Of what our daughter's life would look like. Of. I'm leaving, he said. She blinked. What? The organization. He held her gaze. I've been transitioning out for 2 years. Slowly. Carefully. Because in our world, you don't just walk away, you have to build the door first. I have been building the door. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a single document on the table between them. This is a legal business prospectus. Investment firm. Entirely clean. I registered it 18 months ago. A pause. I registered it in both our names. Amma looked down at the document. Then up at him. Then down again. She stopped. You plan to find me first. I plan to build something worth coming back to first, he corrected gently. So that when I found you, I wouldn't be asking you to return to the same life you ran from. The diner hummed quietly around them. Someone laughed at the counter. A child outside pressed their face to the window glass. The ordinary world, going about its ordinary business, entirely unaware that inside this corner booth, for years of grief and silence and love were slowly, carefully, finding their way back to each other. You had French toast, Amma said suddenly. He blinked. What? You haven't touched the French toast. She pushed the plate slightly toward him. Miss Claudette will be personally offended. She watches the tables on the security camera. He looked at the plate. Then at his wife. Then, despite everything, despite 4 years and an ocean and a truth that had broken them both, he picked up the fork. It's good, he said, after a moment. I know. She almost smiled. I told you. They sat in the corner booth of Sunnyside Diner on a Thursday morning in Atlanta. Outside, the city moved and breathed and went about its life. Inside, 2 people who had loved each other across 4 years of silence began, very slowly, to find their way back. It was not going to be simple. But then, it never had been simple with Amma Asante. That was, Minute Jun reflected, eating Miss Claudette's extraordinary French toast, precisely why he had never wanted anyone else. He didn't leave that day. He had intended to. He had a plan, find her, explain, begin the careful process of rebuilding. Methodical. Controlled. Classic Minute Jun Kwon. Instead he sat in the corner booth until the lunch rush hit, and then he watched Amma Asante, 8 months pregnant, in a yellow apron, with a pencil in her hair, work a floor of 16 tables alone because one of her servers had called in sick. He watched her carry plates she shouldn't be carrying. He watched her laugh with old Mr. Patterson until the man turned pink with pleasure. He watched her talk a visibly overwhelmed young mother through her fussy toddler with the patience of someone who had a gift for knowing exactly what people needed. And when a table of college boys snapped their fingers at her, actually snapped their fingers, like she was a hunting dog, he was half out of his seat before he caught himself. He didn't need to move. Because Amma walked over, smiled her most serene smile, and said something very quietly to the boy who'd snapped. Whatever she said turned him a spectacular shade of red. He apologized twice before she'd finished turning away. What did you say to him? Minute Jun asked when she passed his table. I told him that the next person who snapped fingers at me was getting decaf and they would never know it. She set a refill of his coffee down without breaking stride. Works every time. He stayed for dinner service. At 9 p.m., when the last customer left and Miss Claudette, a magnificent woman in her 60s who looked at Minute Jun with the specific expression of someone assessing a horse at auction, finally locked the front door, Amma sat down across from him again and looked at him with the expression of someone who had been waiting all day to say something. You can't stay at a hotel, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Not because, she made a gesture that somehow communicated 12 different disclaimers simultaneously, but because if you're here, and you're in a hotel, and my neighbors see a man in a $10,000 suit getting out of a car outside my apartment, this entire street will have questions I cannot answer. She pressed her fingers to her temple. I have a guest room. It's small. It has an air conditioning unit that makes a sound like a dying goat. But it is there. You're inviting me to stay. I'm offering you a logistical solution. She pointed at him. Do not read into it. I would never. You are currently reading into it. I am simply grateful for the hospitality. She narrowed her eyes. Why are you like this? You married me, he pointed out. Her mouth twitched. Just slightly. Barely enough to see if you didn't know what you were looking for. He knew exactly what he was looking for. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building with a broken elevator and walls that held the memory of every meal ever cooked in them. It was small and warm and filled with evidence of a life carefully, independently built. A bookshelf crammed with everything from economics textbooks to romance novels. Plants on the windowsill, thriving, which told him she had found consistency here, routine. A crib in the 2nd bedroom, assembled slightly crookedly, with a small stuffed elephant propped against the railing. He stopped at the door of the nursery without entirely meaning to. The room was yellow. Soft, warm yellow, the color of the sunrise he'd watched from too many hotel windows in too many cities in 4 years of searching. There was a mobile of small cloth stars above the crib. A changing table with everything organized in labeled baskets. A small bookshelf already stacked with picture books. She had built all of this. Alone. Her name, he said. Have you chosen it? Amma leaned in the doorway, arms folded over her belly. I have a short list. Tell me. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Nana. After my grandmother. A pause. And Jizu. If, she stopped. If, he pressed softly. If she was going to have a Korean name too, Amma said carefully, her eyes fixed on the crib. She's both. She should be both. The tightness in his chest was almost unbearable. Nana Jizukwon, he said quietly. Amma closed her eyes for just a second. Yeah, she said, very softly. Something like that. He looked at his wife standing in the doorway of the room she had built for their daughter, in the apartment she had built from nothing, in the city she had made a home in 4,000 miles from everything she'd left behind. He had found her. Now the harder part, the part that mattered, began. I'm not going to rush you, he said. I'm not going to pretend 4 years didn't happen or that everything is repaired. It isn't. He held her gaze. But I am here. And I am not leaving. She looked at him for a long time. The dying goat starts around 2 a.m., she said finally. I'll manage. I'm also going to need pickled mango from the shop on Auburn Avenue tomorrow morning because I have had a craving for 3 days and it's becoming a situation. He nodded gravely. I'll get it. It opens at 7. I'll be there at 6:50. Her eyes softened. Fractionally. Fractionally was more than enough. Good night, Minute-jun, she said. Good night, Amma. She went to bed. He stood in the small guest room with its ancient air conditioning unit, listening to the goat dying sound begin on schedule, and felt, for the first time in 4 years, something that was not quite peace but was pointed in that direction. He was in the right city. The right building. 3 walls away from the right woman. For tonight, that was everything. He was back by 6:53 with the pickled mango. And shrimp keluele from a West African spot he'd found 2 streets over that somehow existed in Atlanta. And fresh orange juice. And, she discovered when she shuffled to the kitchen in her robe and found him standing at her stove with complete authority. Juk, the Korean rice porridge her mother-in-law had taught her to make in the first month of their marriage. She stood in the kitchen doorway and stared. You cooked, she said. It's just Juk. In my kitchen. You had everything I needed. How did you? She gestured at the stove. You don't cook. I learned. He set a bowl on the counter and looked at her with an expression so carefully neutral it could only mean he was feeling a great deal. It took 11 attempts before it was edible. The 12th was acceptable. A pause. I've made it every morning for 2 years. Amma stared at the bowl of juk. She stared at the pickled mango, which he had sliced and arranged on a plate because of course he had. She stared at the man standing in her small Atlanta kitchen in yesterday's suit pants and a white shirt with his sleeves rolled up, looking simultaneously like the most powerful and most earnest person she had ever known. Why every morning? She asked, though she suspected she knew. It was something to do that was about you, he said simply. When everything else felt, he chose the word with care, too large to hold. Making juk was one small thing I could do right. She sat down. Very deliberately and with great dignity, because she was 8 months pregnant and how emotions were already running approximately 17 times the normal human rate and she refused to cry before she'd eaten. She ate 3 bowls of juk. She ate all of the pickled mango. He watched her eat with the expression of a man who had been given back something he'd given up on ever seeing again. Don't look at me like that, she said, pointing her spoon at him. Like what? Like I'm a miracle. You are, though. I am a woman eating her body weight in pickled mango at 7 a.m. She pointed at him again. Stop being sincere before I've had coffee. You can't have coffee. I am aware. The word came out slightly more anguished than intended. I have been aware for 8 months and it is genuinely one of the great tragedies of my pregnancy. I dream about coffee. I have coffee dreams. Last week I dreamed about a latte and woke up furious. He was trying not to smile. He was failing. When she's born, he said, I will make you the best cup of coffee you have ever had in your life. Bold promise. I have a man in Busan who sources beans directly from Ethiopia. I have had a bag set aside for, he stopped. She looked at him. For what? He was quiet for a moment. I bought it the day I found out you were Ghanaian, he said. Our 3rd date. I wanted to impress you. I thought, Ghanaian woman, Pan-African sensibilities, she will appreciate excellent Ethiopian beans. He paused. I've bought a new bag every 6 months since you left. Each one, I think, this will be the one I make for her when I find her. Amma set her spoon down slowly. You kept buying it, she said. I kept looking. He met her eyes. I was always going to find you, Amma. I want you to know that. Not because of pride or ownership or anything that belongs to the worst version of what I am. But because, he pressed his hand flat on the table between them, and she watched his jaw work. A world without you in it makes no sense to me. It never did. Not since the day you walked into that hotel lobby in Accra and told my assistant his tie was crooked. She had forgotten that. The very beginning. She had been working the front desk of the Kempinski. He had arrived with 12 people and the specific energy of a man accustomed to rooms rearranging themselves around him. His assistant had a truly terrible tie. She had said something. She couldn't even remember exactly what. Something flip and automatic because she'd been tired and it had slipped out before she could stop it. And Minute Jun Kwon had turned and looked at her. And smiled, not the polished public smile she'd see later in photographs, but a real one, surprised out of him, gone almost before it arrived. He had come back the next morning. Alone. No staff. Tie perfectly knotted, which she suspected was deliberate provocation. He'd asked if she wanted to get breakfast. She'd said she was working. He'd said he'd wait. He had waited 4 hours. You know, she said now, looking at him across her small kitchen table with the Atlanta morning coming through the window. For the most feared man in Korean organized crime, you have always been a hopeless romantic. Only with you, he said. That does not make it less embarrassing. I'll survive the embarrassment. She looked at him. And for the first time since he'd walked through that diner door, she let her face be fully open, let him see what 4 years of loving him through distance had done, what carrying his daughter alone had felt like, what waking up at 3 a.m. in a foreign city with nobody had cost her. And she let him see, too, that none of it had changed the fundamental truth. She still loved him. She had never once, not for a single day, stopped. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He turned his hand over and held on. We have things to figure out, she said. We do. Big things. Yes. And I'm going to ask you things and I need full answers, no protection, no editing. You'll have them. She nodded once, brisk and decisive, very Amma. Good. She stood, squeezed his hand once, and reached for her mug of decaf with the expression of a woman making profound peace with her circumstances. Now, tell me about this investment firm while I figure out if I can forgive you for making Juk better than me. He leaned back in his chair. I'm not sure that's possible. To forgive me for that. No, she agreed seriously. It really might not be. It rained in Atlanta on Sunday. The good kind of rain, heavy and warm, the kind that makes the whole city smell clean and gives everyone a reason to stay inside. Amma's ankles were grateful. She'd spent the morning on the couch with her feet up on a pillow, which Minute Jun had produced from somewhere before she'd even asked, and a new romance novel she'd been saving for exactly this kind of day. He was on her small balcony on a call to Seoul, his back to the glass door, speaking Korean in a low, measured voice. She couldn't hear the words. She didn't need to. She'd lived with that voice. She knew its every frequency, the careful authority of it, the precision. She knew the particular cadence that meant he was ending something versus the one that meant he was beginning it. This call sounded like ending. She tried to focus on her book. She managed 3 pages before she gave up and simply watched the rain. He came inside 40 minutes later, shaking water from his hair, and stopped when he saw her watching him. Seoul, she asked. Tying up the last of it. He set his phone down. The transition is nearly complete. Another 6 weeks and my formal role is fully dissolved. 6 weeks. 6 weeks was exactly, precisely, when her daughter was due. She noticed him notice the coincidence. Watched something careful move across his face as he decided not to say it, to let her draw her own conclusions, because he had always understood that she needed to reach things herself. Come sit, she said. He sat beside her on the couch. Not close, a respectful distance, giving her space she hadn't asked for, which she recognized as him trying very hard not to be too much. She closed the distance herself. Pulled his hand across and placed it on the side of her belly, where their daughter had been going absolutely berserk for 20 minutes. He went completely still. She felt it the moment the baby kicked, the way Minutjan's breath caught, the way his entire enormous controlled composure simply dissolved in real time. He looked down at his own hand with an expression that she was fairly certain she would carry in her heart for the rest of her life. She does this, Amma said softly. Every time it rains. She likes it, he murmured. I think she hates it. I think she's complaining. Another kick. That's definitely a complaint. He laughed against his will, the same startled, real laugh as the diner, and kept his hand exactly where it was. They sat like that for a long time. The rain came down outside. The city breathed. Minutjan Kwon, the most feared man in Korean organized crime, sat on a small couch in Atlanta with his hand pressed to his wife's belly, feeling his daughter move, and looked so unguarded that Amma had to look away for a moment. Tell me what it's been like, he said. Here. All of it. Lonely, she said first. Directly, because she had never seen the point in softening truth. The first year was very lonely. I didn't know anyone. Miss Claudette was kind, but, she tilted her head, she's 64 years old and her primary love languages are food and church, so there was a limit. And after? Better. I made friends. Slowly. She smiled, a little. The Tuesday Book Club ladies. They are delightfully nosy and I love them. There's a woman named Dorothea who has been married for 40 years and dispenses marital advice like a fortune cookie machine, one every 5 minutes, mostly about communication. Wise. She would love you. She has a weakness for handsome men in good suits. She paused. Also Mr. Patterson. He's 81 and he asks after my young man every single Tuesday even though I've told him I don't have one. A sideways look. I may have to revisit that. Minutjan's expression shifted. Subtly. Warmly. May have to. I said may. Noted. Another kick. Amma pressed her hand beside his. His finger moved slightly, tracing a small arc, barely a movement at all, but achingly tender. What do you miss? She asked. From home. He thought about it. The light, in October. Seoul in October has this particular gold light that I've never seen replicated. He paused. My mother's cooking. She doesn't know where I am this week, I told her business. A quiet exhale. She's going to be loud, Amma supplied. Your mother is going to be spectacularly, operatically loud when she finds out about all of this. She's going to cry for 6 hours. Minimum. She shook her head. She's also going to want to be at the birth. Almost certainly. Minutjan, your mother tried to be in the delivery room when your cousin had a baby. She's enthusiastic. She is a force of nature in a small woman's body. But Amma's voice was fond. She had loved her mother-in-law fiercely, had missed her in the specific sharp way of someone who hadn't expected to love her as much as she did. Is she well? She is. A pause. She never believed you weren't coming back. The words landed softly. Amma felt them settle somewhere deep. Smart woman, she said. The smartest I've ever known. He turned his head slightly. Second smartest. Don't. She pointed at him, but her mouth was curving. Do not do the charming thing. What charming thing? She gestured vaguely at his face. The whole, another gesture. That. I'm simply stating a fact. You are stating a fact in a way specifically designed to make me feel things, and I am 8 months pregnant and my emotional regulation is very provisional right now, so stop. He stopped. But he was smiling. And she was smiling. And outside, the rain came down on Atlanta, and their daughter kicked indignantly at both of them, and the space between those 4 years and this rainy Sunday felt, for just this afternoon, like something that could be crossed. Tuesday arrived with Sungwoo. He appeared at the diner at 11 a.m. looking apologetic and expensive and carrying a black folder that did not belong in a place with vinyl booth seats and a chalkboard specials menu. Amma clocked him the second he walked in. She'd met Sungwoo 4 times during her marriage, enough to know he was brilliant, loyal to Minutjan to a genuinely alarming degree, and operated with the emotional expressiveness of a very competent rock. Sungwoo, she said. Mrs. Kwon. He nodded. You look well. I look enormous. You can say it. I would never. Sit. She pointed at the corner booth. I'll get Minute-jun. He was already there. He'd had the same instinct she had. Sungwoo arriving meant something was happening that couldn't wait. She brought coffee and then stood at the booth and looked at both of them with her arms folded. I'm staying, she said preemptively. Minute-jun looked at Sungwoo. Some silent exchange passed between them, years of working together compressed into a glance. There's been a development, Sungwoo said. He opened the folder. The Choi family has been monitoring communications from our Seoul office. They know you're in Atlanta. They don't know why. He paused. They will know why, within 72 hours. Amma felt the specific chill of someone whose peaceful life has just been located. The Choi's, she said. Our primary rival organization, Minute-jun said. He was already in a different mode, she recognized it. The shift from the man who'd held her hand on the couch to the man who had kept an empire in order for 15 years. But he reached across the table and covered her hand. They don't know about you. Or the baby. Yet, Sungwoo said, because he had never sugarcoated anything in his life. What happens when they find out? Amma asked directly. Silence. The kind that answers a question. Right. She straightened. So we're not staying in Atlanta. Minute-jun looked at her sharply. Amma. Don't, she held up her hand. Do not start the argument where you try to tell me everything is under control when it clearly is not, because I have been managing this diner for 3 years and I know what a problem looks like. She turned to Sungwoo. How long do we have to pack a bag before this becomes genuinely dangerous? Sungwoo blinked. She suspected she was the first person who had ever spoken to him quite like that. 48 hours. Comfortably. Can you have protection on this location tonight? I have 4 people 2 blocks away right now. Good. She turned back to Minute-jun. I need to talk to Miss Claudette. I need to make sure Dorothea from book club has my forwarding address. And before you say anything, yes, I trust Dorothea. She is 70 years old and her primary concern in life is her hydrangeas. She took a breath. And I need you to find us somewhere safe to go that also has a functional hospital within 20 minutes because I am not having this baby in a safe house. Minute-jun stared at her. What? She said. You're not scared. I'm absolutely terrified, she corrected. I'm also 8 months pregnant and this baby is coming in 6 weeks whether the Choi family has opinions about it or not, so we need a plan. She looked between them. Can you keep us safe? Yes, Minute-jun said. Immediately, without hesitation, with the absolute certainty of a man who had never once made a promise he couldn't keep. She held his gaze. Measured it. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay, I trust you. She said it simply. Plainly. Like she was handing him something that cost her everything and choosing to do it anyway. Don't make me regret it. He stood. And because they were past the point of pretending and they both knew it, he took her face in his hands, gently, carefully, like she was extraordinary, and pressed his forehead to hers. I will not, he said. I swear to you. She took a breath against him. Let herself lean in, just for a second, into the warmth of him, the familiar architecture of this man she had spent 4 years missing. All right, she said, pulling back with the decisive energy of a woman who has made her decision and is moving forward. I'm going to go tell Miss Claudette that I need a week off, and then I need you to explain to me where exactly we're going, because I have a very specific list of things this location needs to have. Tell me the list. Good hospital. Decent internet so I can do the diner's accounts remotely. A bathtub, not a shower, a bathtub, because my back is a crisis. And... She fixed him with a very serious look. The Ethiopian coffee beans. He smiled. Slowly. Fully. Like the sun coming up. Done, he said. Sungwoo, who had witnessed approximately nothing more romantic in his entire career, quietly closed his folder and looked at the ceiling. He took her to a house on Lake Lani. Not a safe house, he had learned, in 48 hours of being back in his wife's orbit, that Amma Asante had strong feelings about the word safe house and none of them were positive. So instead, a private property, 40 minutes from Atlanta, on the water, with views that had nothing threatening about them. His Atlanta contact had secured it within 6 hours. His security team had cleared it within 8. She walked in, looked at the lake view, and said, "Well, this is annoying." He raised an eyebrow. "It's beautiful," she clarified. "I didn't want to like it so quickly. It feels like a win for you." "Everything being beautiful is not a win for me. You provided the beautiful thing, so." She set her bag down. Surveyed the living room. Warm wood, comfortable furniture, the kind of space that felt designed for actual living. "Where's the bathtub?" He showed her the bathtub. She stood in the doorway of the master bathroom and looked at the freestanding tub positioned in front of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake and said absolutely nothing for 10 seconds. "This is manipulation," she finally announced. "It's a bathtub. It's a statement. It's a bathtub designed to make a woman abandon her principles." "I'll take the other room." She started, then stopped. Then turned to face him with the expression of a woman who is about to say something she has decided, absolutely, to just say. "You can stay. In here. In this room." She held up one finger. "On your side." "Of course. And there will be no," she gestured vaguely. "I understand. Because we are in a process." "We are. And processes have stages." "They do. And we are in the early stages." "Absolutely." A pause. "Amma." "What?" "Thank you." Simple. Quiet. Entirely genuine. She looked at him. Opened her mouth. Closed it. Turned back to the bathtub. "I'm getting in this immediately," she announced. "Leave and come back in an hour." He left. He smiled the entire way to the kitchen. They settled into the lake house with surprising ease. 3 days folded into each other naturally. Morning coffee on the dock, him with Ethiopian beans, her with the decaf she'd made her peace with. The diner's accounts spread across the dining table in the afternoons. Quiet evenings with the lake turning gold and their daughter increasingly insistent about her opinions regarding the outside world. On the second night, lying in the dark on his side of the bed with a respectable distance between them that had shrunk slightly since night 1, he heard her breathing shift. "You're not sleeping," he said. "I'm the size of a planet. Sleeping is architectural now." She adjusted with the precision of someone who had been doing this for months. "I keep thinking about what she'll be like." "Tell me." A pause. Then, slowly, "I think she'll have your control. That way you have of just," she gestured in the dark, "not reacting. I've always been a reactor. I think she'll be calmer than me." "I think she'll have your laugh," he said. Amma was quiet for a moment. "Yeah. Whatever else she has, she'll have that. She already does." He paused. "I could tell. When you laughed with that customer, even on a phone video, across an ocean, for years later, I knew it was you immediately." She was quiet for a long time. He thought perhaps she'd fallen asleep. Then, "Minute-jun." "I'm sorry I didn't give you the chance to explain." The words were careful, thought through. "I was so scared. And when I'm scared Amma." He turned toward her in the dark. "You were protecting our daughter. In the only way you knew how with the information you had." A pause. "I should have been the kind of man whose wife would have come to him with that fear instead of running from it. That is the thing I have been working on for 4 years." His voice was very quiet. "Being someone you can come to." She made a small sound. Not quite a word. "I'm going to fall asleep now," she announced. "If you say one more sincere thing I'm going to cry and then she'll kick and we'll both be awake for hours." "Good night, Amma." "Good night, Minute." On the third morning, he brought coffee to the dock and found her there already, watching the water, her hands wrapped around her mug with the sunrise coming in pink and gold across the lake. He sat beside her. Their shoulders touched. She didn't move away. They watched the light change. "We should talk about what happens next," she said. "After she's born. Where we go. How this works." "Yes. I'm not leaving Atlanta. Not right away. Miss Claudette needs. We can stay in Atlanta." She looked at him sideways. "You'd stay in Atlanta?" "I would stay anywhere you are," he said. "I thought we'd established that." "I'm establishing it more thoroughly." She turned fully toward him. "Because Minute-jun, I need you to understand that I am not the same woman I was 4 years ago. I am, she gestured at herself, at the water, at the life around them. This. I built this. And I'm proud of it and I'm not erasing it. I'm not asking you to. I'm also, she exhaled, still in love with you. I've been in love with you for 4 years of actively trying not to be, which I want you to know was extremely inconvenient. He looked at her. That is the most Amma Asante declaration of love I've ever heard, he said. I know. It's my love language. She pointed at him. Don't ruin it by being sweet about it. He took her face in his hands. Very gently. Amma. Don't. 4 years, he said. 4 years and I love you more than I did the morning you left. I don't know how that's possible but it is and I need you to know it. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright. You are ruining my whole thing, she whispered. I know. He tilted his head. Can I kiss you? You, she blinked. You asking? I will always ask. Quiet. Certain. She looked at him for one long, shimmering moment. Then she closed the small remaining distance herself. The kiss was soft and careful and tasted like coffee and 4 years of finding each other again. The lake moved quietly below the dock. Their daughter kicked once, possibly in encouragement, possibly in complaint. It was genuinely hard to tell with her. When they pulled back, Amma pressed her forehead to his. We're going to be okay, she said. Not a question. Yes, he said. Absolutely. We are. 6 days at the lake house. 6 days of morning docs and account spreadsheets and a slowly, beautifully closing distance between two people who had loved each other across 4 years of silence. 6 days, and then Amma Asante's water broke at 2:17 in the morning on a Thursday. She knew immediately. She'd read enough, prepared enough, been anxious enough about this exact moment for 8 months. She lay very still for 5 seconds. Then she said, with complete composure, to the dark ceiling. Minute Jun. He was awake in under a second. The man slept like a soldier, she'd forgotten that. Ready to surface at any moment. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Her voice was impressively steady for a woman whose body had just made a very definitive announcement. But I need you to get the bag from the closet and call the hospital and tell them we're coming. A pause of approximately 1.5 seconds while he processed this. Then he moved with the efficiency of someone who had, apparently, thought through this exact scenario in considerable detail, because the bag was already packed and by the door within 30 seconds and he was on the phone with the hospital before she'd managed to get fully upright. I need help getting up, she said. He was beside her immediately, his hand on her back, steady and sure. I've got you. You keep saying that. I keep meaning it. The drive to the hospital was 40 minutes. Sungwoo drove with focused speed. Minute Jun sat in the back with Amma, her hand in both of his, monitoring the contractions with the specific attention of a man who had likely memoized a childbirth manual sometime in the last 6 days because of course he had. You researched this, she said between contractions. Thoroughly. Of course you did. She gritted her teeth through one. His grip tightened. Minute Jun. I'm here. I'm scared. He turned to look at her fully. I know. Me too. He pressed his lips to her temple. But you have been doing the scariest thing for 4 years alone. You are not alone anymore. She held on to him through the next contraction. And the one after that. And the one after that. Nana Jizukwon arrived at 6:43 in the morning. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. A full head of her mother's magnificent hair and, already evident from her first furious, opinionated scream, her mother's absolute refusal to be quiet about her feelings. Minute Jun was in the room. Amma had decided this at some point around hour 2 and communicated it by gripping his hand and not releasing it, which he accepted as the clearest possible instruction. He cut the cord. His hands were shaking. He made no effort to hide it. When the nurse placed Nana in his arms for the first time, he stood very still. He looked down at his daughter, this entirely new human, with her mother's nose and his father's brow and her own completely specific identity already evident in every line of her, and his face did something that Amma, exhausted and glowing from the hospital bed, had never seen on Minute Jun Kwon's face before. It simply fell open. All of it. Every wall, every careful architecture of control, gone. Just a man, completely undone by love. Amma, he said. His voice was not working correctly. I know, Amma said softly. Come here. He sat on the edge of the bed. He placed Nana carefully against her mother's chest. He put his arm around both of them. The three of them were quiet for a moment. The hospital room was ordinary and bright and smelled of antiseptic. Outside the window, Atlanta was waking up. Hello, Nana, Amma murmured against her daughter's perfect head. You gave us a lot of trouble, you know. I hope you're prepared for the chaos you've caused. Nana made a small sound. Possibly in response. Possibly in agreement. Minute-jun pressed his lips to Amma's hair. She leaned into him. Thank you, he said. The simplest words he had. Don't thank me, she said. She's half yours. You built the difficult parts. The difficult parts are perfect. The difficult parts are loud. But she was smiling. She's ours. She's ours, he agreed. Sungwoo appeared in the doorway 2 hours later, looked at the scene before him, the family in the bed, the particular quality of light in the room, the expression on his boss's face, and had the rare and profound experience of feeling his eyes go slightly wet. He closed the door quietly. He pulled out his phone. He called the Seoul office and informed them, in the flattest possible tone, that the boss was unavailable and would be unavailable for the foreseeable future, and anyone who had a problem with that should take it up with him personally. Nobody had a problem with it. They were discharged 3 days later. The lake house was quiet and golden in the October afternoon. Amma carried Nana through the front door. Minute-jun carried everything else. Sungwoo, who had appointed himself honorary uncle with zero discussion and apparently planned to stay in the guest house indefinitely, had somehow acquired a second stuffed elephant to match the one in the nursery. It was, by every available metric, almost perfectly ordinary. And then Minute-jun's phone rang. He glanced at it. Frowned. Something shifted in his face, barely there, but Amma saw it. She was watching. She was always watching. Who is it? She asked quietly. He looked at her. He made the specific calculation of a man deciding, in real time, between protection and truth, and she held his gaze steadily so that he would have no question which one she needed. It's Chairman Choi, he said. Amma looked down at Nana, sleeping against her chest with the absolute confidence of someone who has decided the world is safe and warm and available for napping. Answer it, she said. Amma. Minute-jun. She looked up. Her eyes were clear and steady and absolutely certain. We said no more protecting me from things. We said truth. She tilted her head. Answer. It. He held her gaze for one long moment. And then he answered the phone. And what Chairman Choi said on the other end of that call, 4 words, delivered in a voice like cold stone, made Minute-jun go completely still. Made the color drain from his face. Made Amma's arms tighten instinctively around their newborn daughter. What did Chairman Choi say? What does he know about Nana, and what is he prepared to do with that information? And what will Minute-jun Kwon, no longer a mafia boss, but still one of the most dangerous men alive, do to protect his family when the past comes calling with everything it has? Part 2 is coming, and it is going to break your heart before it puts it back together better than it was before. If you made it this far, you are exactly the kind of person this story was made for. Drop in the comments, Team Minute-jun or Team Amma should have made him work for it longer? And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss part 2 the second it drops. Because trust me, ladies, you do not want to miss what happens next.